guys, it's Joey for Witches of the Moon. I am your Tuesday host, and today's topic is advice for new witches. And I haven't watched anybody else's video yet, so apologies if I go over anything that's already been said, but I try not to watch any videos on the subject until I've done my video, and then I don't get influenced. So this is a topic which sometimes I do get asked about, and I find it a slightly difficult thing to really cover. Mainly because I honestly believe that everybody's witchy journey is completely individual and unique, which is why we all embark upon it, because it is a spiritual path which allows us the freedom to choose our own path, to create our own way of experiencing deity, divinity, and the magic of the world around us. I will endeavour to give a few hints of advice here and there from my own experience, but that's all I can really give you, and it's not going to be a black and white advice by numbers on how to be a witch, because that sort of thing doesn't exist. It's a very personal journey, it's a very difficult journey, and I'm going to try my best to put it into words how I feel about it, and I do feel quite strongly about certain things. The first thing that I would advise for anybody looking at being a witch is to try and dispel any preconceived notions of what you think being a witch will get you. I have seen a lot of people think that they can take up being a witch, they can cast certain spells for certain purposes, usually love spells in the case of the very young, and like their life will get easier. And these are the people that usually end up giving up witchcraft or not getting anything out of it, because that's not what it's about. It's not about a selfish want to suddenly be casting spells and getting things easy. In fact, being a witch is a wholly consuming and difficult path that is definitely not for everybody. It is the awareness of the world around you. It is a huge responsibility. You become aware of the energies in everything around you, your impact not only on yourself, but to other people, to nature, to the environment, to animals. And you become aware of the power of energies, and even through what you say. I often say that to be a witch is to daily try and improve yourself in some way, to try and make yourself a better person. It's not for the lazy, it's not for the selfish, and it's not for those who live in their own bubble and don't care about the consequences or refuse to take responsibility for their actions. So my advice on this part is understand the gravity of what it actually means to be a witch. There is huge amounts of joy involved, absolutely, and otherwise no one would do it, obviously. But you have to be aware that there is a responsibility. So my first piece of advice is to investigate fully and not expect instantaneous gratification in a selfish manner. The second thing that I really want to advise, because I see a lot of this going on, is for newbies to hold on to their sense of joy and new discovery. When I was new into the craft, I was very excitable, enthusiastic, and everything was new and joyous and fantastic, and it was great, and I couldn't wait, and I needed to learn, and I wanted to read, and I wanted to have crystals to start doing this with, and I wanted to try this and try this and try this. And a lot of newbies have that fantastic energy, that enthusiasm, And somewhere along the lines, excuse my language, but somebody shits all over their enthusiasm. They call them new, they call them fluffy, they call them uneducated, oh, you don't know what you're doing. And it's this sort of discrimination against people who are new into the craft. And it's absolutely disgusting. I've seen people doing it. It's horrid. And my second piece of advice for new witches is, if you encounter anybody who has that kind of attitude, ignore them. Do not associate with them. Do not be disheartened. Do not allow that person to ruin your experience of the craft. It can be very difficult. It can be so difficult. And I've seen it, you know, the prejudice against new witches, and I've seen prejudice against Wiccans, which is what new people often start with, even if they don't end up in that path. Hold on to your excitement. Hold on to your joy. Hold on to everything that encouraged you to look in this path in the first place. Write everything down. There's another piece of advice. My third piece of advice. When you're starting out as a new witch, write everything down that encouraged you to look at this path. I love nature. I love animals. I love this. I love this. And keep it positive, you know. I want to know this. I'm interested in magic. I believe in the 4 elements. I've always loved mythology. I've always loved history. I've always loved herbs and herbal medicines and being green and looking after the environment. And I always feel I have a connection with my cat. I always feel this, this, this and this. I make a huge positive list that you can keep. And anytime you feel disheartened, you go back to that list and you look at it and you think, this is why I got into this. I'm not going to let anybody else ruin it for me. So that's my next piece of advice. Don't allow anybody to dishearten you or put a negative spin on anything that you are learning about. So my third piece of advice is to read around as much as you can on the subject and try and gather as much information as you can, whilst being aware that no matter where you get the information from, it is based on the personal experiences of whomever wrote it. You can disagree with something you read in books, and you should. If you feel wrong about it, then you should disagree with it and, you know, make a note in pencil. Or if you really resonate with something, then you can make a note in pencil in your book, or write it down and keep that in mind. Keep a logical, discriminating mind. And by discriminating, I don't mean against other people. I mean keep your mind open to the ability to put your own belief into what you read, even if it's in a book. So if you disagree with a point of view, you are perfectly entitled, even as a new witch, to disagree with that in your gut. If your gut and your instincts say that you don't agree with that, then you don't agree with that, and you shouldn't just change your mind because somebody else has told you so. There may be points along the line where somebody tells you something and it opens up your mind to a new way of thinking, and that's a completely different experience from just being like, oh, this person says it, so it must be true. No matter how old the witch, no matter how experienced the witch, you know, it doesn't make it completely right for you. So that's my next piece of advice, is A, to read around as much as you can on the subject, and B, to keep in mind that you are allowed to agree and disagree with different points of view. It's your right as a human being to have a rational mind. Just because it's within spiritual matters doesn't mean that you cannot disagree with a point of view should you so wish it. So there's 2 pieces of advice in there. One is to read extensively and keep learning. No witch on the planet should say that they have stopped learning at any point, because if the point where you think you know it all is the point where you should give up, there is always something to learn, no matter your age, no matter your experience. And this is true for me and everybody else. You should always be learning, experiencing, growing, along the path. So yes. And as for reading, I mean, I read for 5 years before I started actively practicing. The idea of a year and a day comes from Wicca, and that's just to sort of ground you in the basis of learning and make sure that you are serious about it, because to be serious about it is pretty essential, because it is a lifelong thing. And honestly, once you've dedicated yourself, and it's a serious commitment to what I consider a beautiful way of perceiving the world and trying to change the world. It's all about energy and nature and appreciation and self-empowerment as well as self-betterment. I'm sure there's a proper term there, but it's first thing in the morning. So that's a few pieces of advice. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, there's learning, there's trusting your instincts, there's not letting anybody ruin your enthusiasm. I would say probably my final piece of advice is don't be afraid of admitting that you don't know anything or you don't know an awful lot. One of the most inspiring witches that I have come into contact with recently, I'll give her a little shout out here, is Punky Bruiser. And I will make a shout out video in this week or the next week on my channel for her and for a couple of others. And she's so inspirational to me and so grounded to me because she's openly states, I don't feel like I know enough, I wish I knew more, I'm not quite there yet, I want to understand, I want that knowledge, I want to grow, I want to learn. And the amount of people who can freely admit that is second to none, and I find it really inspiring that she does that, because it's basically a self-awareness, an acceptance, and then it allows the knowledge to come. It's a good basis, a good grounding in honest awareness of self. Like, I want to know this, I want to learn, I'm excited, and I understand that I'm not there yet, and I want to be further along, and I want to get there. Rather than people that are like, yeah, I totally know it all, I totally know that. And there are people that will do that, you know. So I find that incredibly inspiring and the right way to start off addressing things. And it's the right, it is the right way to be for life. Basically, I am freely going to say here that there are plenty of things, and sometimes I get overwhelmed by the amount of things that I do not know or understand. And life is a journey, and we keep learning, we keep growing, we keep on, we keep on, we keep on. And that's fine. That is absolutely fine. And whether you learn from other people in a coven environment or a non-coven environment, from a solitary teacher or as a solitary witch, this might actually be a good point. I might actually use this as the next piece of advice. Right, okay, let's switch it up a bit. Right, all of those methods are ways in which you can learn the craft. Now, you have to decide for yourself which is the best path. Now, for me, it's always going to be solitary, very much because I don't really... I'm very, very strong-minded, I'm very strong-willed. I like things my way, I like my own words, I like planning my rituals, I like my own words, my own way of doing things. If I want to do something off the cuff, then I will. And if I want to create things, then I will. And I wouldn't have got along with someone telling me that's not the way to do it. So solitary was always going to be the way for me. Now, I have learnt from other people. There have been people in my real physical life that have come in and taught me things and helped me understand things, whether it be through a positive or negative experience. And a lot of people have been online, like through forums initially, through YouTube more recently, and it's an exchanging of information, and it's fantastic. And there are some really inspiring people out there, and they share things, and you either agree or you disagree, but it doesn't really matter. You just take it on board, you process it within yourself, you add it or disregard it, and if you disregard it, you say to yourself, okay, why am I disregarding that? Why is that not right for me? It's that critical mind again. You're gathering information, weighing its worth to you without judging the person who gave it, and then deciding what to do with that information. Now, you as a newbie witch have to decide what is right for you. Do you need someone in your physical life who is going to teach you? Is that even possible? It wasn't possible for me, I don't think, really, not really at all, but I wouldn't have got on with it either. If you commit to a coven, then you're pretty committed. Is that going to be a situation where you get a positive experience from? Now, some people get positive experiences from real life covens, some people just don't, and you have to decide in your heart of hearts which person you are, how you're going to get the best, most positive experience out of it for you. And on that note as well, do not dabble, and you will hear this term. Now, you have to be careful where you hear this term, because some people use it as, like I said, being negative and trying to discourage newbies' enthusiasm. You do get that, but it is a very serious point here. You should not delve into things which are further along the line than you are ready for, spirit work particularly. You know, you don't want to be ill-informed, not ready, diving into things which you're not ready for before you practice it. This is why I studied for 5 years before I even started actively practicing. Now, if it's something that you really don't want to get into, then just don't get into it. You know, if there are certain areas that you don't feel comfortable investigating, then don't do it. I mean, you can be a witch, and I've said before, you can be a witch without casting spells. You can just be a witch going out into nature, honouring the god and the goddess. You don't have to do any more than that to be a witch or a Wiccan, or however. I mean, Wiccans have more of a structure, but and particularly if you follow coven-based and other people's, that tends to be more strict than, say, your own solitary experience. And I can only really talk about solitary experience because that's the only experience I've had and is comfortable for me. So don't push yourself further than you are ready for, which is the counterbalance to being aware of where you are at. And there's no point in being, you know, egotistical about it. What are you going to gain? You're not going to gain anything from being, oh yeah, I'm totally the shiz. It's nonsense, and you have to lose all that sort of egotisticalness when you engage in this path anyway, because it's not what it's about. It's about being humble and honouring the god and the goddess. However you see source, deity, spirit within nature, and taking care of nature and improving nature as well as yourself. So I think that is everything I have for advice for new witches. It's a difficult subject for me. I hope I covered everything that I can think of at least. So that's it for this video, and many blessings.